In this video, I want to discuss with you all my advanced parole DACA experience, and right off the bat, I don't have DACA, but my wife does, and on top of that, I'm her attorney, I'm representing her, so this is my experience from how, everything went. So to begin, she's had DACA. We're thinking about doing advanced parole, when Biden did mention that it was back. Family member of hers got ill, her grandfather in Mexico. Then that's when we were considering doing advanced parole. Once we learned of how severe his condition was, then we did call the USCIS number. It's 1-800 something. I'll put it down below. And we requested an emergency info pass meeting just because of how severe his condition was. We were scheduled an info pass meeting. It was about maybe 2 weeks after we called. So we were a little worried, whether that would be soon enough to go visit him. And regardless, we had the appointment, and I went with her. I represented her. It was straightforward. I know she was nervous. I wasn't as much, just because, she has DACA. They're not going to deport you just for applying. They're not going to, reprimand you for applying. When you have the info pass, you have to present all the supporting documents, the forms, the I-131 form, and show, why you merit, why you should get the emergency advanced parole. If it's not, an urgent reason, if it's not an emergency, then they won't give it to you. But, thankfully in our case it was. So yeah, we went, to the Fresno USCIS office, and then the individual just reviewed, pretty much kind of like a clerk, receptionist, if you want to think about it that way. Reviewed all the documents, make sure everything was there. Once she verified everything was there, then she gave it to an immigration officer. That immigration officer was then the person that reviewed it, to determine whether it was sufficient or not. And, for the application, we did include documents showing that, my wife was the granddaughter of the grandfather, birth certificates showing that, granddaughter, mother, grandfather, the supporting medical documents with translations, a cover letter, just wrapping everything up, describing it in an easy, way to digest, what's going on. And then that was everything. Of course, we had to include the fee. You can get all the extra information from the USCIS website, which will be included down below. Everything went fine. That same day, thankfully, we got the advanced parole document saying that she would be allowed back in. Of course, it's not a guarantee, as they say. You have to show that you warrant being allowed back in. So, you got to keep in mind, there could be reasons that you are not admissible. So an easy example would be like if you commit murder or some severe crime and you get advanced parole, you're not likely to be able to go out and come back in with the advanced parole. The advanced parole isn't going to waive the other grounds of inadmissibility. If you're not too sure, if you're kind of treading carefully, you think maybe there might be an issue, I'd say speak with an attorney, speak with a nonprofit. You shouldn't just submit it and then hope that things will go well. You should, be confident, be assured that you did everything you can. If there is no crime, you could be safe. I wouldn't be able to tell you. Just the other day, there was that Univision article from the person that had DACA. They exited and now they can't come back in. I don't know exactly what happened, whether the attorney didn't ask her, or whether she didn't know, whether the mother of the DACA individual didn't tell her that they were previously deported. There was somewhere miscommunication. And I just say that just to say, you don't want that to be you. It could be that everything might go well. It could be that you do it yourself and everything is good, great. But you don't want to put yourself in that situation where, you're outside of the U.S., your wife, your kids are here. So that's just something to be mindful about. Had there been better communication, that individual that I'm telling you about could have likely, done a FOIA to get, all of her records from whatever agency had it. It seems that it didn't happen, again, for whatever reason, but it's just something to be mindful about. So yeah, my wife got the advanced parole. A few days later, about 2 days later, I believe, she left to Mexico from LAX. They arrived in Mexico. They spent time with their family. And, after a few days when they came back, that's where I started to worry. For sure. I mean, if you leave the U.S., it's not going to be too much of an issue. I mean, she had her Mexican passport, so yeah, she's going to be allowed into Mexico. But my concern was, what if, immigration wants to cause some sort of problem? What if they, give them a hard time? I'm not there. I don't know what's going on. I can't represent her from here. So that was what was worrisome. And yeah, I mean, when she got into the airport from Mexico, coming back to the U.S., I was a little worried, but I was more worried once they got to the U.S. because that's where they were going to be inspected and paroled in. So I remember when I was texting her, I wasn't getting a response. I was looking at the times and everything for the flights, just seeing, oh dang, okay, they left at this time, they're going to arrive at this time. I should be getting a response. I should be getting a message from her soon. And around that time when they arrived there and they were supposed, when it would have been the time for me to get a text message, I wasn't. Maybe 30-40 minutes went by, and that's when I started to worry, just thinking, oh dang, what if something happened? What am I gonna do with the kids? What am I gonna do here? What are we gonna do? Do we have to move to Mexico? What does it look like? Just thinking the worst case scenario. But thankfully, it was maybe about soon after that when they were going to board the plane. My wife just stated that they had to go to further inspection just because of the advance parole document. Once they were there, they sat down for a few minutes. It was maybe about 5 to 10 minutes. And then once the immigration officers had time, they called them over, verified their, employment authorization document, their work permit, and then their advance parole. They made sure everything was correct. And when it was, they stamped it, welcomed them back, and they were in, and that was it. And, thankfully it went by very quickly. Thankfully, there was no problem. And the great thing about it, I mean, I know most people already know the benefits of advance parole. Generally, if you don't have any other ground of inadmissibility and you get the advance parole and you are married to a citizen or a resident, or let's say, I mean, even if you have a sibling or a parent, you could petition to become a resident. The sibling and parent route, depending upon your case, might take longer. I mean, but in the grand scheme of things, if there's no other way, if you don't want to get married, you just want to go on with life, you want to study, work, etc., then it may be good if you have that option to proceed forward. They do take longer depending upon the case, but if you're married to a citizen or to a resident, it opens the doors. You do not have to. Generally, every case is different, but you may be able to then adjust status to become a resident in the U.S. And if you have more questions or want more information, please let me know down below. If you want to book a consultation, there's a link down below. Thank you, and God bless.